everybody. My name is John Schaefer. Welcome once again. It is the third Tuesday of the month, and of course, you know what that means. That means it is time once again for our Green Thumb Lecture Series. Today, we have a very cool program. This is all about gardening with less water. And a couple of housekeeping things real quick. I want to remind everybody that we have questions. If you have questions, please go ahead and type those in on Facebook or on YouTube or wherever you're watching this. We will get to those questions. I will pause in the middle of the show at some point and also at the end of the show. So we definitely want to get to everybody's questions. And we also have Harris County Master Gardeners watching and moderating this. So they might be answering your questions with some really good links and some information as well. So please get those questions in. Also, a reminder that we have we do this every month on the, of course, third Tuesday, and we will be here again next month. That will be on that will be on June 20th, and we'll be doing pollinator gardening. And it says here, I want to attract more birds, butterflies, and bees to your garden. Will get the buzz on quick and easy tips and add colorful beauty to create welcoming host environment in your home landscape. So sounds very good. Now then, enough of me talking. I would like to definitely introduce to you our host of today's show, Gardening with Less Water. Jean Pfeffer. She's a professor emeritus at the University of Houston chemistry department. So she knows what she's talking about. She's been an active member of the Speakers Bureau with the Harris County Master Gardeners for 25 years. She has a dedication to promoting organic gardening, water conservation, and attention to climate change. So please welcome Jean. How are you doing, Jean?
Good.
Good to have you here. Good to have you here. Very good to have you here. Well, like I said, we got a great show. I might as well let's go ahead and get it going. Let me get your presentation in here right now. I believe it is in the show. So I'm going to pull myself out and let you get going. Thank you so much, Jean. And once again, keep those questions typed in.
Okay. Okay. You may never have heard about Oya pots. Oya is just another word for pot, but this is a new method here that's really about 5,000 years old. And I think that it would be wonderful if more people could use this. We're also going to talk a little bit about water and water conservation because this would be a very good contribution to that effort. If you're a backyard gardener or you have a small garden, this is very applicable. Before we talk about that, let's talk a little bit about water and why we should conserve it. After a couple days of 4 inches of rain, it seems easy, silly to talk about that. However, we don't get a consistent amount of rain in this area. And as a result, when we do have it, if there's some way to conserve it and gather it up and save it, that would be good. So if you know anything about collecting water collection, that's another thing that you should be thinking about. It's becoming very critical in some areas of the United States. And as I say, that doesn't seem obvious in the last few days, but it is becoming critical. California is having terrible problems. And of course, it does go up quite a bit in the summertime. 40 to 50% of the water applied through automatic irrigation systems is wasted. Look around at your neighbors when it's raining and notice how many of them still have their irrigation system going because they didn't bother to look out the window. Climate change is causing a lot more of the flood and drought cycles that we're having. So as a result, we need to be more aware. And we should conserve water because we can. There are many ways to do it. And what we're going to talk about today is one very good way to do it. The water usage, municipal water supply people who make rules, they have a list of priorities. And personal use is obviously people have to have water to drink. That's, life saving. They also worry next about fire safety, food production, farming, that sort of thing. Power generation, of course, water is critical in some areas to that. Manufacturing and industrial, people use a lot of water. And look what's at the bottom, lawn and landscape. So if there's a problem with water, sometimes they'll put in a priority. They'll list it as not a priority, and there'll be restrictions on how many days you can water, or how often you can water, how much you can water. Let me tell you that there are methods of watering your garden that don't get noticed or don't get prioritized or stricken off the list of things that can be done when there is a drought problem. And one of those is what we're going to talk about today. Another one is drip irrigation, which you probably also know about. If you have a garden, of course, water is critical to growing anything, whether you're growing tomatoes or begonias or magnolias. Water is critical to their survival, unless, of course, you're planting cactus. And that's okay, but even cactus needs a little water once in a while. But you have a choice for your garden, and look around and see what's happening. Hand watering, of course, is nice. It's easy to do, but it's very time consuming and it's boring. And so it's hard to know when you've watered your garden. Have I watered it enough? Are things going to grow? How long should I water? That sort of thing. So often people will have a sprinkler system. That's your next choice that can be automated. And many people in my neighborhood do have an automatic sprinkler system. I kind of keep my eye on it because it's interesting to see whether it's set up properly or whether they're paying any attention to it at all. Another choice you have is leaky hose, which just is something that lays through your garden, and it's basically a plastic that is porous. And I know that a lot of people are familiar with this, and that works fine. What doesn't work with the leaky hose around here is that after a summer or two, with the heat that we have, and the possible freezes that we have, it doesn't last long. There's also a type of leaky hose that can be buried, and that works better because it's not exposed quite so much to the heat and the weather problems that we have around here. The next best is drip irrigation, because what you're doing is you're delivering water to the soil. The soil is what needs the water. The plant doesn't. The plant appreciates it probably when it's raining, but it doesn't need it because water isn't actually absorbed through the leaves. It's absorbed through the roots. So what you want to do is deliver the water as close as possible to the roots. And drip irrigation is, of the things that are listed above, that is a good system that has been tested and used a lot. It was actually, drip irrigation was invented, or at least started to use in great numbers in Israel. And I've been there, and truly they have made the desert bloom using drip irrigation there. The next best thing is what I'm going to talk about today, which is clay pots and clay pipe. There's all kinds of ways that you can use this quality of clay to get the water where you want it, and that's in the root zone of your garden. Just a little structure here of clay. Clay is actually like it's a layered structure, and depending on what kind of clay it is, there are about 4 different kinds of clay that can be identified. They're basically aluminates or silicates, and then in between the layers, there are water molecules. These interstitial water molecules are what make clay pots, porous. And if you fire a clay pot at too high a temperature, you drive out all of that water that is part of the structure and make it less porous. And so high fired pots will not allow water to leak out through the clay itself. So that will become important as we talk more about this. Just thought you might like a little picture there. These two pots that you see here, and I'm sorry, the lighting isn't a little better. I should have tried a little harder with that, but I think that perhaps you can actually see that right here, there is a water line. Dark clay down here means that water is moving out through the clay. And if you waited a few minutes, you would see the water ending up down here on the table. This pot on the left has been high fired. This one has not. This one has exactly the same amount of water in it, or it's about half full of water. And you can't see a water line because water is not moving out through the clay. So if you're going to use clay pots to water your garden, you have to buy the ones that are low fired. And those, of course, are going to have much higher porosity because they have more water left in the structure of the clay. If you're going to do this particular method, you have to test the pot to make sure that your seal here is, and we'll talk about that also a little bit later. Oya pots, the traditional one that are named Oya pots, are on the left, and you can buy them. The 1 gallon pot, which this one is, would cost you about $45. You can make one in various different ways. This is a custom made one that was used in a California project that we're going to talk about. And that's going to cost you about $10 because those two pots that are glued together with silicone glue, they each cost about $5, depending on where you buy them. You can get them a lot more expensive, but if they're really expensive, you would have to be careful that they weren't high fired, because if they are, they're not going to work for you. Now there are pots that are water resistant that are not high fired, and I found this out when I was testing the pots for another project that we were working. And these pots actually have a layer of a non-porous material between the clay layers. It's kind of like a clay Oreo and I don't know, have not been able to figure out or find out yet about what this material is. But it is a non-porous barrier between layers of clay. Why would you do that? And why would you high fire some clay pots? Well, if you have clay pots in your backyard and you plant plants in them, you put the soil in the pot and you put the plant in the pot, then you know that if you're having to water those pots more often than you do something that's planted in a ceramic pot that is high fired, or a pot that is clay, plastic, or metal, or even wood, because if you don't want to water a lot, then you need something that isn't going to leak water out the sides, where it's of no use to the plant that's in that pot. So just another warning that there are pots, and if you're going to use clay pots for an irrigation project, then make sure you get one that actually do allow water to leak out through the clay. Water moves in both directions. So if it's very wet inside, the water is going to leak out. If it's dry inside, and if there's a choice, then water is going to come into the pot. The rate in the clay pot that's buried, which is what we're doing here, we're burying these pots in the ground and they're full of water. So the rate that the water moves out of that clay pot into the roots of the plant is influenced by the needs of the plant and the difference between the saturation in the pot and in the soil. It's better than drip irrigation. There's no question about that. It's 10 times better than surface irrigation. I'm talking about sprinkler system or even a fairly extensive leaky hose kind of situation. And it's very useful in arid environments. A little history, just to let you know that it's been around for quite a while. It is an ancient technology, and it was, there's evidence that of use 4,000 years ago in China. It's thought to have been originated in North Africa, but it's still used today in many areas of India and Iran, Brazil. The interesting part of this thing is that in these areas, there are a lot of people who are potters. And so an Oya is easy to get because they dig clay out of the soil and make the Oyas from them. They're not fired very high. This also adds some profit to the local industry because people are making the pots and they're used locally in the gardens to grow food, which is badly needed in many of these areas. There are other advantages which I'll show you, that it's useful in a wide variety of plants. You can also use, you don't have to use clean water. You can actually use contaminated water. And of course, that is the problem in many areas. If they just take water out of the local source of water, whether that's a lake or a river or whatever, they can't control the contamination that's in there. The water moves out through the pot. And of course, this might have something to do with the age or how long a pot would work for this particular process, something that we're really trying to study. It works with seeds. It works with seedling transplants. And as I mentioned before, the production of Oya pots provides work for other members in the community in the poorer countries. It preserves the soil surface because you're not digging around in there. And it doesn't, when it rains, that rain helps to compact the soil. The more the soil is compacted, the less likely the water is to move freely through it and drain very readily. So this does not affect the water moving out of the pot into the soil, doesn't have any effect on the soil structure itself. It delivers the water to the plant roots, and the roots grow toward the pot side, seeking that water, making it easier for the plant to get the water that it needs to grow. Okay, in California in 2019, this project was built in California, and there were two gardens set up. One was a 6 Oya pot, and the pots that I showed you at the beginning, where the two pots were glued together. The capacity of those pots was 1.5 gallons, and they were connected, and I'll show you a picture in a minute. They were connected with a drip line, a solid drip line, no holes in it. There was another garden next to it or in the same area that was equipped with drip irrigation. The comparison bed had the same variety of plants as the Oya pot garden, and the yields for this project which was in the summer of 2019. There was some problem here, and they never figured out what that was all about. But I think the thing that you can see particularly is that in all cases, there was at least the same or more in the Oya bed than in the drip bed. The herbs and the thyme, the herbs in general produced equally. There was no difference. I mean, with herbs, it's a little hard to tell. You don't want to weigh the whole plant and see if it's better or less. This is a picture of the Oya bed, and the one with drip irrigation was right next to it, across the way. And so the Oya pots are buried. There are 6 of them. There is a reservoir. This reservoir is 5 gallons, and there is a valve so that all of the pots can be filled at the same time. This makes it a lot easier to do the filling, which is really the only thing you have to do with a bed like this. You can probably tell that each one of these tubes is shorter. In other words, this is a gravity-fed situation. If they were all equal, they wouldn't fill very, very equally. It would be hard to know when they were full. But in this case, since it is gravity-fed, and this is not a closed system, obviously this tubing going down in there has to be loose because air has to come out if water is going to go in. And so when you see water coming out of or around the tube, then you know that the pot is full. So it's easy to know when you're done. Raised beds aren't needed in Northern California. So this is just, you just bury them in the soil that you have there. The water usage was what was important. The Oya bed was, the Oya bed calculation is here. The drip irrigation bed is this, the second one you see over here. So the Oya bed took 75 gallons for the month of July, 75 gallons. And that's easy to do because every time you fill up the Oyas, you know how much water went out of the reservoir, and that's easy to tell how much. With the drip irrigation bed, you can see that's an incredible difference. The drip emitters were checked for accuracy, and the volume used was calculated using the emitter rating and the time the system was run each time. And of course, the drip emitters are rated in gallons per hour. So usually you can get drip emitters that are 1 gallon per hour, 2 gallons per hour. And then the person who did this actually checked the accuracy of those drip emitters and then just calculated using the rating and then how long the system was run each time. And so for the month of
Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to hit some questions in a second, though.
Oh, okay. Well, I just, when things moving around and you didn't move. A little humor is always good, right? At any rate, the soil amendments, the fertilization rate, and the plant varieties were identical, as much as you can be with plants, because they have their own capabilities. And so, but as much as possible, that may have been the problem with the tomatoes. We're not really sure.
Well, since I've interrupted you, let me go ahead and let's pause for questions now. We have some questions that have come in, so I just wanted to get those to you real quick. Michelle asks if I have plants / vegetables already in the ground and would like to change to a clay pot irrigation. Is it safe to dig into the ground and bury the pots near the existing plants, or should I wait until the plants are finished and start with them next season? She doesn't want to damage the roots.
No, I don't think you would. Probably it depends on how full your garden is at this point. I mean, right now things are growing so beautifully. You may not have room to put in an Oya pot because you do have to, a gallon pot takes up quite a bit of room. So I would say you have to make that judgment for yourself. If you can dig a hole that isn't really real close to the roots, it probably would work fine. So you would have to judge that for yourself,
Okay.
whether or not that's going to work.
Another question, or a question I had, is what about mosquitoes? Since we live in, Houston, and that's an issue. Is the opening small enough to where?
It's,
Okay, so that's not mosquitoes and critters. We're not worried about.
No, but this does come up. I mean, I've given this talk many times, and I do have people that worry about mosquitoes. We're going to talk about other ways to use this, because I ended up not connecting them with the tubing that you have, and we simply have corks in the top.
Okay.
And so that's no problem. No mosquito is going to get in there unless he's really quick while you're filling the pots. But yes, the tubing just needs to be loose enough that air can come out.
Right.
So they're pretty tight. I mean, you can slide them up and down,
Okay.
but they're very tight. And I doubt mosquitoes going to work that hard to get that tiny little space.
Well, good.
But it does come up, and I do understand that.
Sure.
There is no big open water available to a mosquito.
Right. And of course, in Houston, in Harris County, they're going to have plenty of other open water sources they can go to.
Especially right now. Yes.
Exactly. What about, you talked about testing the clay pots, and obviously I loved the idea. I saw the one where they'd flip two pots on the side.
Right.
Is there a way to identify if a pot is going to be porous enough by the name of it, or do you just have to test all like the big box store pots and see if they have that porous ability?
I always test them. And one thing you can do is just splash a little water on the pot.
Okay.
If it's absorbed by the pot, it's gonna work, unless it's one of the ones with the Oreo, the sandwich.
Right.
Okay. And those I only discovered we've done this twice. We've dug up the pots and reused them in new beds. And I only discovered these sandwich pots because there were several that weren't working. I mean, you can tell if you go to fill them and they're already full.
Right.
So that's when I discovered that. But I still haven't discovered why they do that. I mean, I know they do it because you're going to use it to plant things in. They're not going to use it for irrigation.
Right.
So there's a good reason for doing it.
Now, you might be covering this later on, so I apologize if I'm early with this question. But is there like a formula for like how big of a pot you need versus how far away the plants can be, or how close the plants need to be versus is there a rule of thumb on that, or?
No, I can only speak because I've done it enough to know that when we built our original beds, there was about 2 feet between the pots, and they were 1 gallon pots.
Okay.
The beds were 4 feet wide, and using a moisture meter, I judged that the soil was moist quite a distance from everywhere. I mean,
wow.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it gets to an equilibrium where if you keep the pots relatively full, I mean, fill them on a regular basis, like every couple of days, the beds reach an equilibrium, and then and they just stay moist because the water comes out as it's needed to keep that happen. And if you get a rain or two in between, that makes everything wonderful.
Yeah.
The pot doesn't have to work so hard, and you don't have to fill it again.
Awesome. Well, tell you what, everybody, keep those questions coming in on Facebook. As I mentioned, we have Harris County Master Gardeners watching the chats on all the different social media sites. Jean, I'm going to let you finish up, and then we will pause again, or we will stop for questions at the end. But loving it, and I'll let you get back to it.
Okay, thank you. The next question, after hearing about this California project, which was, by the way, done by a master gardener in California, the question was, would it work here? I mean, our soil is so different, and let's give it a try. So I work at an elementary school teaching horticultural things, teaching kids where food comes from, and a lot of other things about gardening in general. We had an Eagle Scout who was eager to do a project, and we thought this would be really a neat thing for him to do. So we gave him the project. We gave him certain criteria, and we, of course, use raised beds here. So we needed to start from scratch. And we told him that we wanted the Oya pots to have 1 gallon capacity, and he drew up his project and went for it. The pots, as you can see, are 1 gallon. In this case, since it's raised beds and we couldn't dig any deeper than if you're in California, you can dig as deep as you want to because there's nothing stopping you. Here, you've got clay soil and something, and we're always using raised beds. So the pot is going to depend on how deep is your garden. And so these are 9 inches. And so since 8 inches is a minimum raised bed, this seemed to be a good thing. So instead of gluing 2 pots together, we glued the saucer to the pot. And then, of course, the fill hole is you flipped over when you put it in the garden. So this is the fill hole. And we put some washers around it just to give some stability to the clay, which can be, you can break it pretty easily. And also with the reservoirs are 5 gallons. And then we had a manifold with a valve, so that to fill the pots, all you needed to do was to open the valve and watch to make sure that water is coming out of the pots and they're all full. Some of the pieces that you need are just the bulkhead for the bucket, for the reservoir, and then the hose connectors going into the different pots. We started from scratch. We actually removed the sod and built the beds on top of that. We had 3 beds that were 20 feet long and actually 20 inches high, which was more than we really wanted. But it was an Eagle Scout project, and we went with what he designed. They were built. We had 3 of them, 4 pots per bed. And we actually, since these were 20 feet high, 20 inches high, sorry, we actually put the pots on bricks, so that would bring the 9 inches so that it would be at the soil level. So the pots were placed, the tubing was inserted, and then the beds were filled with garden soil. And you can see that the reservoirs are on pedestals one for each of the beds, and all ready to go. So in the fall of 2019, we planted cabbage in here. We planted cabbage seedlings. They had been started indoors ahead of time. And you can see the difference in a month we had in really good growing. And you'll also notice that the soil is now below the top of the Oya pots. There's not anything you can do about that because this is brand new soil, and it's fluffy when you put it in there, but as it gets wet and is used for growing, there's some compost in there that goes away. So this sort of thing always happens, but there's still plenty of water coming out of those pots. We also tested it with other kinds of crops like lettuce. We planted 5 different varieties of lettuce. And, we're working with students and children, and we go from pre-K up through 8th grade. So they don't know a lot about how you plant seeds. But so we did a lot of thinning, but I think you can see that everything did very well. We were concerned because the movement of water is all below the surface. But if you rake your hand just gently across the surface, you get moisture almost immediately. But we were concerned with things like lettuce and carrots because they are actually planted by basically just laying them on the top of the surface. Since they need light to germinate, we were concerned that it might not be quite moist enough for that to happen. They all germinated within 7 days, and every variety did extremely well. We then planted snow peas and carrots. The carrots didn't do as well as we thought they should, but we're trying them again. But everything did well. The peas were fantastic. They grew all the way to the top and lopped over the trellis that we had put up, and gave us a lot more peas than we could eat in a short time, but do very well. But the carrots weren't as well. So there's a little question there because, again, carrots are planted on the surface. The spring garden, the next garden, of course, was in the spring of, guess what, 2020. And we planted tomatoes, peppers, and they all did extremely well. That planting, of course, those are usually planted at the end of February or beginning of March. And then the gardening, of course, was interrupted by the virus. And so although the gardening with students stopped, I was still there, and I have a cohort who also teaches. We co-host or co-teach the horticultural program at the school. And so we would go and take care of the beds, but there was no student involvement with the spring garden, except for the planting that happened really early before things hit the fan. The peppers were less productive, but I think we were simply too eager to get, and the beds were very crowded. And the fertilizing schedule was limited because of our limited access to the garden. But it was wonderful. I was still picking tomatoes well into the summer. In the fall, we planted sweet potatoes. And this is questionable again, because in order to grow sweet potatoes, you normally mound up the soil and plant the sweet potato slips on top of the mound. That's not possible when you have the Oya system, because there's no place, you can't mound it up over the pots. And little mounds on the side wouldn't work. But, I mean, they grew extremely well. It's just that the sweet potato production was quite a bit less than we expected. So you might, if you like to grow sweet potatoes, you might have a regular bed or a bed with drip irrigation in it for sweet potatoes, or no irrigation, because the reason summer is a good time for sweet potatoes is that there's usually nobody to tend the beds, so they get limited water in the summertime. Okay, the fall garden did extremely well. All around, as I said, produced something in the bed with the new soil. And remember, this was brand new soil. There's probably very few microbes in there when you start, and they come as things grow. The moisture was consistent throughout the bed. I measured it with the moisture meter on a regular basis. The interval between filling pots was 3 to 4 days, and they weren't totally empty every time, because remember, there were 4 pots and our reservoir was 5 gallons, and it never took the whole 5 gallons to fill the 4 pots. The surface appears to be dry. But the seeds, at least the lettuce seeds, did germinate in the expected amount of time. So I'm not really concerned about that problem. All right, so that we lost those beds because the school decided to build another building, and We have other beds at the school that are used by the lower grades, like the kindergarten. And there are these tank beds, which are 21 by 46. They originally were cattle tank beds, but of course people are using them now for gardening because they're wonderful. They're a good height. So I made some Oyas half-gallon capacity. Since these were smaller beds, the pots were placed 2 feet apart, and there are corks in them to keep the insects and the dirt out of the pot. When you're filling it, you take the cork out, put a funnel in, and fill the pot. So it's very easy to do. These work very, very well, and the kids love that. We also planted cucumbers. You can see a trellis here that did very well. We were filling them about every other day. They're very easy to fill with a funnel, so that's not a problem. And we have herbs growing in other beds, and so we have 6 of these tanks, and they were all full of something the next year. That was last summer. And in my backyard, I'm using an Oya. This is also a half-gallon Oya. This bed is 2 feet, so that the Oya there's a foot on each side of it. I planted 4 brassicas, which was really dumb, but I took 2 of them out later because that's just too much in a pot this small. I use potting soil, of course, Microlife fertilizer, and compost. And again, was filling them every couple days, 2 to 4 days, depending on rain. Because if it rains, then I usually skip a day. Well, the advantages to this system. You saw the incredible difference in the amount of water that was used. The problem with an automated system, even with drip irrigation, you don't know. If you run it for 15 minutes, is that giving the soil adequate moisture? Is it too much moisture? Maybe you're watering more than you need to. It's obvious to me from the California project that the drip irrigation system was run a lot more than it needed to be. So it's another thing that you need to look into. It reduces the water stress on plants. There's nothing worse for a plant than to be neglected for a couple days and it starts drooping. And then you water it in it quick, and it does recover often, unless you've let this happen too many times. It's tired of recovering, and so you can't just water it. But evenly moist is kind of the mantra for a garden. No, there's not a plant that loves to be soggy wet and then left to dry completely, and then soggy wet again a few days later. So the evenly moist situation with the Oya beds is incredibly good, and it delivers the water where it needs to be. Weeds don't do well on the relatively dry surface because a lot of weeds, they kind of like to wiggle down into the soil a bit before they germinate. We did not have a big weed problem with the beds. Of course, they were also very high up, so that anything that a bird might drop on its way across the bed, it would germinate and do well. But there wasn't a lot of weed seed blowing up into the beds. The Oya beds definitely guard against overwatering or underwatering, really. You have to pay attention, and you have to figure out how often you're going to have to fill the Oyas. But still, if you're conscientious and pay attention to the weather, you can't underwater. It saves water because you don't have any loss from surface evaporation. The water doesn't get to the surface very easily, and what little gets there evaporates, but it doesn't happen very, very fast. So you're really saving on water. And if you're collecting rainwater, rainwater is wonderful to fill the Oyas with. So, I mean, it's all free, right? I wanted to show you what happens to the roots in these Oya beds because I thought it was interesting. And this is a pepper plant. And you can see, I think, that the roots are pretty evenly distributed around the end of the stem. And this is in a drip irrigation garden because we also have 3 beds at the school that are irrigated with drip irrigation. So when I pulled this up and I saw that, I took a picture because I thought it might be useful in the future because I knew we were also using the Oya beds. These are roots from an Oya bed, and this is another pepper plant. There's the Oya pot. There's the hole that I pulled this out of, and I've laid it the same way I pulled it out. So the roots you see are growing toward the Oya pots. And then I took it and put it and took another picture of it so that you could see more easily where the roots are all growing, mainly on the one side that is closest to the Oya pot. And during our 2020 year, one of the pots got broken and I had to pull it out. And so when I put, there are the bricks that those original pots were sitting on. And you can see that the roots are just circling the pot and imitating the shape of the pot. And the roots are definitely attracted because there's water coming out of that pot. And if the root wants water, that's where it's going to get it. The disadvantages, if there are any, there is winter breakage. If we had really heavy freeze, there was no effect this last freeze that we had, and we have beds that are now fully Oya'd. It's difficult to find commercial pots, and they are expensive. You can order them online. I've noticed a lot of the nursery catalogs now have Oyas in them. But they're, as I told you, if you want to use 2 or 3 of them in bed, it's going to cost you $100 or more. And usually there's only a couple sizes that you can find. We don't know what the reduced porosity is with usage. It could be 5 years, who knows? But I can tell you that the pots that we used in the original beds, we reused 3 years later in new beds, and they were pretty pristine because what I could see and what I could dump out of the pot was minimal. There's no data on the best shape or volume or material. I suppose you could make these pots out of some other kind of clay. Maybe there's a better clay to use. But really, all you need is clay that's low fired and is willing to release the water as it comes out. But I am gathering more data on placement of pots and the distance between, although that doesn't seem to be, when you're within a certain range, it doesn't seem to be critical. All right, these are new beds that we now have 10 of these at the school. And we planted hairy vetch because we wanted to improve the soil and we didn't have anything else we wanted to plant in there. These were new installations and they've only been used since the fall of last year. They each of the beds have 2-gallon Oyas, and the beds are like 2-4. These are 3 feet wide, 3 feet wide and 8 feet long. And since they manufactured these beds, they put a board right across the middle here to strengthen them. I don't think that's actually necessary, but they did it and I couldn't change it. So that's a problem because I really would be happier if I could put 3 Oyas in this bed equally spaced. But we have now used them for the fall planting and the spring planting, and everything's going really well. So I can't be too sorry about that. The beds are filled with garden soil and fertilized with organic granular fertilizer. And once everything's planted, the fertilizer that we use is a fish emulsion. This is the bed that is planted with what's called good bug blend to bring in pollinators. And so that's kind of leads into next month's talk about pollinator gardens. This one is opposite our 4,000 gallon water retention from rainwater off the roof of the new building. And the overflow drips down into this flume, and then that goes down to an underground system that waters like a trench that's near the edge of the property. And this picture was taken in December. I think this was probably planted shortly after school started in September. The bed is planted with a blend of beneficial insect attractors. We have 4 beds like that. The 4 corner beds are either butterfly attractors, bee attractors, and so we really have a lot of good bugs in our garden, and so we don't have much of a problem with bad insects. Oh, and here's some references and credit. There is a book that was written by David Bainbridge, and he has also written some articles. If you Google him, you'll get some information about him. If you're interested in the clay problem, you can get more information there. This is my contact information if you want to ask me questions after this is over and you get home and you say, oh, I should have asked her, so you can do that. The data and photographs from the California project was actually done by my son, who is a master gardener in California. He's actually a retired MD. So we have people really interested in this stuff. So that's it. John, do we have more questions?
Wow. Yes, we definitely have more questions. And first off, to echo Michelle's comment on Facebook, this is fascinating. It really, really is. I had no idea about this, and I'm excited to try it now. So let's get to some of the questions. Joanne wanted to know if you're going to try carrots again this fall to see if.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
You haven't given up on the carrots.
Oh, no. We can, they're little carrots that are, I don't know what they're called, but they're just round little things they look more like radishes or turnips. Okay. So if you've got a bed that's not very deep, you can plant things like that. But no, we just had so many new things that we wanted to try that we haven't gotten around to the carrots yet.
Okay. And one of our questions was they were asking if this is like if watering plants this way reduces fungal disease in plants, or do you know if it has any effect on the health otherwise?
We had no problem with that. That is really more like, I would say yes. And I don't have any data to back that up, but I do have quite a few years of experience. And I know that part of the problem with fungal disease and so forth really comes from sprinkling. Using sprinklers in your garden is absolutely the absolute worst thing you can do. Leaky hose isn't great, but it's better than sprinkling. Right. Because it's splashing my stuff from the soil up onto the plants that's causing that. Yeah.
It blows me away when you think about how this, no water will be wasted if you use the clay pots. It's every bit of water that goes in is going to go out to the garden, and you're not going to have any evaporation. So What about like, let's say in your container, how do you check to see if it's, you just fill it up occasionally and see roughly when it fills up? Are you actually looking down the hole, or is,
Well, you just, I mean, you can. I mean, you can stick your finger down the hole, and if you don't come to water pretty soon, you probably should fill it.
right?
But I just have taken it on a kind of pay attention sort of way. And I know that what's happened to the weather in the last few days, has it been hot? Yeah, it probably
Right.
needs to be filled. And I don't know, the funnel method just works. And it's, I can go over there and do all 10 beds in about a half an hour.
Right. No, yeah, that's really, I mean, that's really neat. What about, I had a technical question. When you're making your own Oya pot, what type of silicone or what type of sealant do you recommend using to like glue the saucer to the pot, or the two pots together? Do you have to get a specific kind, or is that get technical?
No, I've used several different kinds. I've used the sort of thing that a plumber would use in the bathroom if he was fixing something. I've used the silicone. Originally, I was recommending, because that's what my son used in California, food grade silicone.
Okay.
And it works fine. So if you're worried about contamination from the glue, you can use that. It's not hard. And also, since it's usually clear, or you can get clear silicone, it looks neater and they can't tell that you're sloppy. If you use the white stuff, it shows every error that you make.
Well, I mean, it's buried though, so they'd have to dig it up and,
originally. Just don't show anybody your pots before they're buried.
Well, that kind of leads me to another question, or two more questions about the, the technical aspect of it. One is, what's the biggest you've seen these pots go? Like, it seems like at some point it wouldn't make sense to go much larger than a couple of gallons.
No, because you take up too much room in the bed if the pot gets too big. So You're better off using smaller pots and putting them closer.
Smaller pots and more of them, kind of, so you can get a good spread.
Because you want a lot of your bed to be where the roots will be.
I thought those pictures you had were some of the best thing, where the roots were. That reminded me, like, I can't tell how many times I've pulled a potted plant out of a pot and the roots are all, it was interesting to see them on the outside of the pot.
Right. Yes.
It was the opposite of what I usually see.
Yeah, so, you don't mind it girdling the pot if it's girdling the outside of the pot. Right?
Exactly. And what about, let's see here. Another question was, now, I think you said you used some of those pots again, like after a few years, but have you seen, other than breaking them, I mean, have you seen do they wear out a lifespan? I mean,
well, yeah, the original pots were buried in the fall of 2019. We're using those again. They were buried in the new garden in the fall of 2023. So that's 4 years. They're working fine, except, as I say, I could tell that they weren't working, excuse me, because I go to fill them and they were already full. Wow. So I got out my hammer and I found out why they weren't working, because they were all this sandwich thing.
Wow. Okay. Well, this has been very cool, and I noticed you were kind enough to put your email address on the bottom of the slide there. That was very kind of you. So if anybody has any questions down the road, I'm sure they can send you an email about this. And
also, one other thing I might say is that I have made 2 things on YouTube about this.
Okay.
So, if you just Google me, you'll get that, because I haven't done that much else on YouTube. There's also an article about this in the July-August issue of Texas Gardening Magazine.
Oh, it's good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I am impressed. I'm gonna try this. I definitely I'm sold. You got me sold on this. I think I'm
Oh,
gonna try
yeah.
it with the cattle. But I've been wanting to do one with the cattle. The cattle. What do you call them? Cattle
Tank.
feeders
Well,
and
yeah,
cattle tank. Yeah.
they're actually building garden beds now that they're intended to be gardens, but the cattle tanks work fine.
Well, listen, thank you so much, Gene. We really appreciate it. We want to remind everybody that we have another show coming up next month. That would be Pollinator Gardening. That's going to be on June 20th. So, people, once again, you don't want to miss that. So, we are here the third Tuesday of every month. So please feel free to please check it out. Also, check out the Harris County Master Gardeners webpage. They have tons of information about it, all the different things going on that they do. So with that, we'll say thank you so much, Gene. We really appreciate you talking to us, and we'll see you guys next month. All right.
Hey, thank you.
Bye-bye.